Okay, we'll start now. We seem to have lost Ben, but I'm sure he'll join us in a couple of minutes as soon as we've found out where he is.
On Facebook.
He's probably on Facebook, so I was saying. First of all, apologies, because we seem to have a lot of men sitting out the front here, but we did have Catherine Ormrod, who is going to be presenting this morning. And unfortunately, at the last minute, I believe she couldn't come. So that's why we're... The gender balance will slowly be made up, yes, later in the day and tomorrow, I believe. So again, apologies for that. Well, to warm us up with some questions, I have to often deal with 120 students in a lecture theatre, and they're all busy on their mobile phones. And I just wonder, and no one's really discussed this, how aware are people of what's actually going on? I mean, I just get the impression that a lot of people on social media, they're basically sleepwalking.
I can say a little... So from both my clinical experience and the interviews that I've... Oh, hello. Hello?
It's very close to the...
It's on.
It is on.
Is that better?
Yep.
So from my experience with young people, they are acutely aware of it being an issue. Mm-hmm. Yet they don't feel that there is much of a solution. So one of the young people that I spoke to just described to me that she couldn't imagine taking herself off social media for very long, because she's literally she's cutting herself off from the whole lifeblood of the school that she was at, and she just felt that she'd be incredibly isolated if she did that. So in my experience, they are really aware of it, but they don't really know what they can do.
Okay. Would you like to? Thank you.
Yeah, completely agree with you, Louis. I think for youngsters, Generation Z particularly, that they are so aware of the well-being issues linked to social media, like 100%. But there's no way out. The trade-off is just too strong in the favour of using it. There's too many benefits and too many costs of not using it that the well-being sort of element is kind of just pushed to the side. Even though in my research I found there's a once bitten, twice shy thing happening. Like, if social media has caused someone like a severe issue, like quite often, like in the research I do, a breakup, or their parents have like docked all their pocket money or something like that, then it's this kind of thing that can actually lead them to quit. But they're only quit for like a few weeks before they're back on again.
I mean, I have the experience over years of watching my students, and they're sort of 18 to 20, and they won't turn their phones off even for an hour. And I've tried to go through lots of different sort of scenarios saying, well, if you miss these key facts, you've wasted a whole hour, and that doesn't work. And so I've tried getting stronger and saying, turn your phone off. No one is going to die during the next hour. I don't know whether that's probably not allowed nowadays, not socially responsible. But even that level of shock doesn't seem to get through. People, well, a lot of my students, these are technology students, they're not psychology students, who might be a bit more with it, I don't know. Ollie might be able to say something as well. But they just don't have any self-control, it seems to me.
I'll just say very, very briefly that we do have to think about this in terms of addiction. And with addiction, I think you wouldn't necessarily say to a heroin addict that they don't have self-control. And I know it might seem like a harsh contrast, but I genuinely believe that is what we're looking at. We're looking at these platforms being designed in a highly addictive way. They are using gambling psychology and gambling design. The word is slot machine psychology, which basically offers you a variable reward. And that is the ultimate hook. So it applies to email, it applies to social media. It's when you go on to that thing and you're not sure whether what you're going to see is going to be good or not, like in a fruit machine. You don't know if you're going to win or you're going to lose. And that is the initial hook that really fuels the dopamine system. So I really do believe it's quite important to talk about it in terms of addiction. And that does resonate with the young people that I speak to as well. It doesn't necessarily help to get them off it, but I feel like that's the right kind of language.
Thank you.
I think social media is probably here to stay. We're just gonna, it's already so embedded in our lives. So can we get it to change it? Can we get big social media giants to change their business model so that there's not just this incentive to get us to click on anything and to, the more polarized it is, the more we're likely to click on it or react to it. How do we get them to change their business models? Is a good question. Can we go off Facebook for a month collectively in order to try and force them to change their business model, for example? Even that is quite hard to do.
You have to organise it on Facebook.
If I try and take the conversation to another level, if we think more about the evolving of consciousness, people have mentioned a few of the apps perhaps being used in a very positive way. What can we do? Is there anything we can do to push for change?
I think this touches a bit on your question, Barry, about how the internet is changing spirituality and the forms it takes. And that's interesting. And we are seeing more and more spiritual leaders appearing and rising, mainly through social media. So, Jordan Peterson, who's absurdly kind of popular as a spiritual leader, and his popularity really grew through YouTube and through his lectures online. And now there are kind of new religious movements appearing mainly on YouTube, like Teal Swan. Have any of you come across her? There's a very good podcast about her. Search for that. And, she makes these YouTube videos and they've got, thousands and thousands of hits. Now she's growing her kind of commune in Costa Rica. And it's quite controversial because,
What's her name?
Teal Swan. So there's a new generation of kind of gurus appearing on YouTube. So I suppose I'm to some extent in this kind of educational around well-being spirituality thing. And in some ways it's freeing. I've blogged for 10 years, and that's kind of what I put a lot of my activity in. I've certainly found, in reference to your point, the more I spill my guts out and, about what a mess my life is, the more my readers like it and the more money I make. So there's definitely weird incentives to be, fucked up. But so it's, it's a new space to play with new forms. But it's also exhausting because then you see someone doing it even better and getting 10 times the hits. We've talked about Rebel Wisdom, a friend of ours, and we're like, oh God, they're so on point. They've got, they're getting so many hits, or London Real. Oh, they've got the videos and now the online courses. So there's this, innovation, but it's compulsive innovation. You've got to keep up with it, otherwise you're left behind. So that's tiring as well.
I'll just make a point sort of connecting to David's talk earlier this morning, that I think probably our greatest revolutionary potential lies in our attention and our capacity for attention as well as collaboration. And I've written in an article about an idea that we're turning into the fragmented human. So Herbert Marcuse was a Marxist philosopher in the 50s. He described how human beings were turning into what he thought was a one-dimensional man. This is with the advent of television at that time. He thought that it was really dampening our revolutionary potential because everyone was just fixated on the same thing. Whereas now what seems to be happening is everyone's encouraged to find their own individual path. And you can have one spiritual teacher, and then you'll move on to another one and another one. And so my biggest concern is that there's this sort of fragmentation which weakens our potential to resist. And I think our greatest capacity is to pull back our attention through practices like meditation, and sort of just figure out together more collaborative ways to work, to move beyond this kind of strong paradigm of individualism that we're living in. I know that's very abstract, but that's kind of what I'm feeling.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to add in, Ben, or no, passing? Okay, so practically, okay, would you like to, everyone, we have some questions from the audience. So there's a lady over there. Let's open it up.
Hello, everybody. Namaste. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? All right. Some statistics I heard last year, but I think it's a study that was done by the Harvard Business School, found out that the goldfish has a better attention span than the average human being. Goldfish 9 seconds, human being 8. So there's something to ponder upon. I keep on hearing you talk about people feeling the unrelentless drive to keep on being online. I know I no longer belong to the 18 to 20-year-old generation, but I somehow remember what it is like to say no to something, to say, I don't want to do this anymore. How's that with the generation that you are dealing with? I hear you doing studies with much younger audiences. Has this completely seeped out of the equation of being able to step away and say, I don't want to do that? And I'm also very curious if you have encountered in your study some of those maybe unicorns of youngsters that have said no and don't want to do so anymore, to be engaged on this anymore.
Would you like to? So you want to explain? Ben,
It's a good question. I really, really struggle to remember a participant now that has actually said no for a prolonged period of time. They may have gone off for 6 months and come back with a new profile, but no, I honestly think mentioned a minute ago that if you go off social media now as a youngster, then you know that you're alienating yourself from not just social media but the social, because those two things are really, really entwined.
I was just wondering, following on from that, Ben, have you looked at all at governments using social media as part of their... You talked about a kind of unofficial disciplinarian community. Have you seen that moulding at all with more like official disciplinarian measures? For example, I saw the Home Secretary saying the new ASBO would be young people being actually banned from social media for a bit. And how that would be policed. But then, I mean, we should also mention this thing, that the new system that China is launching, a kind of national rating system for how good a citizen you are, where you all get a score, and that can affect your ability to travel, your ability to get loans, and it's fed into social media as well. Like on dating sites, people would say, I'm a 6.9, you know. So that, and it's very popular. It's a kind of Confucian online rating system. But so, yeah, whether you see a kind of overlap between unofficial and official systems of discipline and punish.
Yeah.
And I think it's even worse. I heard that China was experimenting with AI systems monitoring children in classrooms and by facial expressions, seeing whether they were engaged or not. And that was then giving a social rating, and that social rating was already saying whether the school would, for instance, recommend that student to go to university?
Like, really great point, Jules. Like, I'm sure I don't know any more than any of you about this thing. But yeah, this whole Big Brother surveillance, whether it be formal or formal, it's coming, and it's coming big time. Like the Black Mirror episodes, it is going to be like Black Mirror when we all get ratings. Like Uber drivers, I think that's the thing we probably engage in most. We rate them, they rate us, and that's just going to carry on and carry on and carry on until we become kind of like prisoners of this big data society. I think just kind of going back to the effect it's having on teenagers at the moment. So just an example I'd like to know, because I think it's important here, is that so my sister-in-law is 17, and I had to look after her for 2 months just by myself recently. So we talked a lot about Snapchat and stuff. And one day she looked really, really sad. Her name's Cece. I was like, Cece, what's up? She goes, oh, my best friend hates me. And I was like, why? She goes, I've got a longer Snapchat streak with her boyfriend than she does. So I think it's the gamification now of relationships for teenagers. And that's what we're saying, that the design is like, it's addictive, but it's gamifying relations in a way that encourages kind of surveillance and repercussions. It's scary.
Oh, yeah. Sure. Other questions? Lots of questions.
I just want to say just a quick thing, and then hopefully trying to balance it out with a little bit of hope, because I don't want it to feel too dark. There's two examples that I want to share. One is a young person that I worked with who fell into that trap of streaks. And for anyone who doesn't know what streaks are, basically on Snapchat, you get a streak according to how often, how regularly you communicate back and forth with a particular friend. And it carries on as long as you keep communicating regularly. And if you stop, I think it goes back to 0. So it's creating this anxiety that you have to keep communicating all the time. And so this boy that I was working with said that even when he went on holiday and he knew he wasn't going to have any signal, he left his phone with a friend and gave him some of his pocket money so he could keep the streak going with his friend. But the more hopeful message was that his mum found this out, and she did a really good job, like loving boundaries, and she talked him through it and said, this is just not good for you. And she educated him without being too authoritarian. And so when I spoke to him later on, he just said, I've really realized how bad that was for me. I'm so grateful to my mum for just having that conversation and helping me to say no. And as a result of that, his use of those social media platforms, he was still using them, but in a very, very much reduced way. And one more thing really briefly, which is a completely different story, which I think this is positive, but I'll see what you think. Somebody else, a young person that I interviewed, was using the dark web, which is a less not surveilled part of the internet, to get drugs that he wanted to take with his girlfriend, and he wanted to experiment with psychedelics and MDMA. And he was telling me, when he was telling me the stories about how they were experimenting, they were using these psychedelics in such a conscious way, which when I was that age, it was the complete opposite. We just got some dodgy stuff off some guy off the street. We had no idea what was in it, and we just wanted to get off our heads. So I know that's a bit of a weird example, but there's also like kind of, I feel like there's this positive, there's these possibilities with the internet as well. Better drugs.
Thank you very much to all the speakers. Moving away a little bit from the sort of 18 to 20-year-olds, I hear what you're saying. I've got but one of each of those, an 18 and a 20-year-old, and I've seen them consciously adapt their behaviour in and out of social media platforms and understanding where they're at with them. I'm afraid to say that I think this is very much a reflection of their mental health at the time. And therefore, as their mum, trying to navigate them through that the social media is a just another material system that we have to engage with. However, moving away, what my question was about adult usage. And I just wondered if, just about your comments, because my use of social media is all to do with a kind of business where I don't sell anything. So it's very confusing because social media seems to entirely be about selling stuff, and is therefore very confused by philosophical notions. And maybe SciMed has actually discovered this online as well, where you're just trying to give information about lovely things. And I just wondered as well, so really my questioning is about adult use, and what I've noticed is that most adults sit and play games on their phones, on the London Underground. That's what I notice. Not get freaked out by Snapchats and Facebook. That the role of money in this process, which has barely been mentioned, and sort of the commodification process that goes on within social media, which, a lot of these likes are about how much money you put into the likes, not really about the likes at all, about how far you can spread the net, and therefore how much money you can put into effectively your social net.
I think we've got multiple questions.
Multiple.
Yeah.
So it's about adults, money, and commodification, and kind of like how you see those, like where to take a more critical aspect of social media.
Well, perhaps one of the first questions that I think you were saying, I mean, was that you see a social, if you like, social disconnect, that there's a difference between adult behaviour, if you like, and our children's behaviour. And so perhaps the issue associated with that is that most adults don't really understand what the effect of social media is on their children. Is that reasonable?
I think like most adults now understand they can sympathise, but they can't empathise with the effect on social media of their children. But I think the effects are there's the same effects in adults as well. They're not as pronounced. Like my mum, I used it as a case study for my PhD. I just go, right, I had this great model, and I just go, Mum, take a picture, and she'd be just doing something, and I'm going to post this on social media. She's just, no! And I think the same processes are happening, the same psychological process happening at every age. It's just, for youngsters, it's more, it's a larger chunk of their self-esteem is linked to these sites. I don't know if you'd agree, guys.
Any question?
Yeah, 100%. My parents came down to see us and our daughter 3 weeks ago, and I had to take a picture of the scene to send to my sisters to show them what was going on, because within 2 seconds, basically, of having not seen her for about a month, one of them was just looking on their phone at their own, reading the news, which is different, but they're still looking at the phone and being disconnected from what's going on in real life, and the other one was taking a picture to put it straight on social media. So, I mean, that's just a personal anecdote. I was really annoyed. I don't think there is necessarily a huge difference.
Okay. It made me think just, is it one of the issues is that we don't teach moral dilemmas? And we don't teach our students, because I have about an hour, I think, with my students on ethics, and they're not aware that moral issues, ethical issues are a different. You have to, first of all, they don't understand what they are, and that they are different to ordinary other types of problems, if you like, life problems.
It makes me think. I interviewed the guy who set up Esalen, Michael Murphy, last year. And they used to have all these sessions in sensitivity training, these encounter sessions. And then they just kind of handed it over. They got a new CEO who is from Silicon Valley, from that kind of tech engineer mentality,
Yeah.
where it's kind of like yes or no. Like, and apparently he said that, you know, that crowd couldn't handle ambiguity.
Yeah.
It was either or.
Yeah.
And they're creating systems which don't work very well in ambiguity. It's either or. So I suppose it's the kind of old Huxley thing of balancing the sciences and the humanities as well, and having space for both. All these questions.
Yeah. We are out of time. Do we want to carry on for another 10 minutes? Ollie or...
Well, it's up to you, Chair, but maybe another 5?
Hands up for who'd like to come on. This is a social discussion. Right, let's have 5 minutes of quick questions. Quick fire questions.
I'm interested. Have you ever, do you ever ban the use of phones during your lectures? Any of you, the lecturers?
Can't. But yeah, I can't. But as far as I'm aware, it's an impossibility. You may be aware that many schools now ban smartphones, but at higher education, that becomes impossible, as far as I'm aware. Nice potential solution.
Yeah, this was just a comment about this idea about whether adults are affected, and I don't know if anybody noticed when you put your Minto thing or whatever it's called up with your book on it, there was a like sign underneath it, and we were discussing that we both pressed like, you know, on the basis of what? You know, we'd seen the cover of the book, we know you, but who knows what's in that book that we just click like to? And there's something about that superficiality, not being able to go deeper, but not the time or the opportunity within that context. But we were experiencing that and discussing it here.
Right, so my question is in regards to the exponential evolution of technology and some of the plans of Facebook to create Facebook Spaces, which is basically social media in virtual reality. So now understanding the implications of it without being in virtual reality, I would like to know your thoughts on the implications of having social media in these spaces.
It becomes more engaged.
Right, a couple of other quick comments, and then we'll just have some answers from the front.
We've just heard mention of the CEO of Silicon Valley. Now, it is a fact that the billionaires who make their multi-billions on social media technology have sent their children to the Rudolf Steiner Waldorf schools where phones are banned. Now, if that is not hypocrisy personified, I don't know what is.
My 13-year-old goes to Steiner School, and they the upper school can take their phones in, but they have to be put in envelopes and locked up for the day. That would help. And interestingly, actually, in the Steiner schools, some of the families have no access to social media or social media, and the children are much happier. Visibly much happier. It's their lifestyle, it's the lifestyle their parents have chosen, and it's not an issue. But my point is that the trigger, the child at a very young age, why does it happen then? You know, what is it makes happen? And it doesn't have to happen so young. So we may have young parents watching their young son maybe playing football, whereas there might be another child there with a screen. And it's happening so much. But the point is the connection with their true identity needs expanding. The amount of time, even children that are addicted to social media, if we can extend that amount of time that they spend connected with their real identity, maybe swimming in the sea, running through the forest, whatever, those experiences need expanding so that they can actually feel what it's like to feel free and in connection with their own identity.
Can I thank everyone who's thrown a quick comment? Thank you very much. Any quick
I just want to say one quick thing.
responses?
Quick response to the fact that most of the Silicon Valley founders don't let their kids either have smartphones or they're really restricted in how they use them. I had a meeting with a colleague of mine, Aaron Ballick, who's written some really good books about the sort of psychodynamics of social networks. This is about 4 years ago, and he gave me a massive light bulb moment because I said, I can't believe that this is the case. And he said, well, do you think like the CEO of McDonald's let their kids eat McDonald's every day? Well, obviously not. So it's just, that's to put it in the context of what needs to happen, and I think it's starting to happen, is more of a public health campaign.
Jose, virtual reality becoming more social, I think it's going to be fascinating. I kind of really look forward to it. I'm just, you'll know much more about this than us, and we look forward to hearing you talk about it in your presentation tomorrow. But I would just end with a kind of thing about we're, as a culture at the moment, in the kind of dystopia, in the social media, it's a nightmare thing, but it's not all that. I mean, like, I was helped to get over social anxiety thanks to the internet. Like, through that, I discovered that social anxiety was helped by cognitive therapy. Through the internet, I found a cognitive therapy support group. Someone had illegally downloaded a CBT course for social anxiety, which we used in the group. Then through the internet, I could say I was so helped by CBT and I was helped by philosophy. So all of that story of recovery was mediated through the internet. So there's that as well.
Okay, I just asked Ben, last comment.
Last comment on the last question about true selves. I know this is probably an unpopular opinion, but like I really don't think we can segregate one's online self now from one's offline self, especially for the youngsters. They're so intertwined that you can't bring them apart.
Just a little fact to finish, really, which is that the brain works by the way of each neuron being connected to hundreds of other neurons and radiant spreading. And in, say, Facebook, everyone has, the average number of friends for someone in Facebook is about 200 to 300. So you're one person away from 200 times 200, which is 40,000 people. You're one link away from 40,000 people. You're 2 links away from 40,000 times 200, which is 8 million. And you're 3 links away from 8 million times 200, which is well over 1 billion. So it's an extraordinarily radiantly linking system. And sometimes I think that perhaps that it's hard being in social media in the same way that it's hard being a brain. In that you have this massive radiant spreading of information, some of which is probably not what you want to hear. And I can imagine that a neuron going, I don't want to be part of the brain anymore because the amygdala keeps sending me these nasty messages. I just want to be my own neuron.
Right, well, we'll stop the session there. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you very much.